Hey friends, how's it going? The movie opens on a quiet rural farm. An old woman sits by the window, sewing and humming a soft tune. Everything feels peaceful, until the faint sound of bottles clinking echoes from the barn. Worried, she grabs a lantern and heads out to check. Inside, the animals are restless. She calms them down and returns to care for her bedridden husband. Later that night, she writes in her diary, but her pen stops when a distant howl of wolves breaks the silence. The camera shifts to the barn again. The animals grow uneasy, staring into the dark. Suddenly, the bottles hanging above start rattling violently. For just a second, a shadowy demonic figure appears. Then everything falls silent. The next morning, the old woman is chopping vegetables in the kitchen when a chair behind her slowly moves on its own. She turns around, eyes wide, and the scene cuts to black. It's Monday morning now. Her daughter, Louise, arrives at the farm. She's come home to visit her sick father. As she walks through the gate, her mother greets her coldly, saying her brother Michael came a few hours earlier. She warns them both. They shouldn't have come here. Later, Louise finds Michael outside with an old man named Charlie, fixing a flat tire. That evening, the family sits around the dinner table, barely speaking. The tension is thick. When Michael tries to comfort their mother, she suddenly lashes out. When he asks about the doctor, she insists they already know the truth and demands they leave the house before storming off. That night, the siblings sit together, trying to reconnect. They talk about their parents, about how distant they've all become. Michael says he plans to stay for a week. They can't just leave their mother alone. Louise quietly admits she feels guilty for not showing more love, but Michael brushes it off, pretending everything's fine. Later that night, Louise locks the front door and heads to the kitchen for a glass of water. But as the house grows quiet, the door slowly creaks open on its own. She pauses, uneasy, and walks over to close it. For a split second, something dark flickers in the corner of the room, an indistinct shape, gone as soon as it appears. She looks outside, finds nothing, and shuts the door again. As she turns back, her mother is standing behind her. Louise brushes it off, saying it must have been the wind, but her mother's face shows she isn't convinced. A while later, Michael sits at the table, working through some paperwork while their mother chops vegetables in the kitchen. Without warning, she begins to hum softly. Michael tells her to rest, but she keeps insisting they should leave, that something isn't right. When he asks what she means, she goes quiet, and he walks away. Left alone, she returns to chopping. Moments later, a chair behind her scrapes across the floor. The sound makes her tense up. She starts chopping faster. Her breathing quickens, and in one sudden slip, the knife cuts deep, severing her fingers. She freezes for a moment, staring in shock, then breaks down, crying as she continues chopping through her own trembling hands. By Tuesday morning, the kitchen is a mess of blood and silence. The severed fingers are still there on the counter. Michael and Louise rush through the house, calling for their mother, until Louise finds her hanging in the barn. She screams for Michael, who runs to help. Louise grabs a tub, climbs up, and cuts the rope, while Michael catches their mother's body. The next day, Wednesday, the house feels hollow. Their mother is gone, and both Michael and Louise are consumed by grief. Even their neighbor, Charlie, is shaken. She'd been their mother's only friend in that isolated place. Later, their father's nurse arrives and tells them something unsettling. She explains that their mother often whispered to herself when she thought no one was around. When Louise asks what she used to say, the nurse admits she could never understand the words, but it always felt like their mother wasn't speaking to her husband, but to someone else entirely. Haunted by guilt, Louise decides not to sleep that night. She sits beside her father, keeping watch as he breathes weakly in the dark. Later, she wanders into her mother's old studio, a place that still smells faintly of paint and dust. In the corner, she notices a mannequin draped in a white cloth. When she lifts it, she finds a wedding gown beneath, and stitched onto it is her own name. The sight leaves her shaken and emotional, as if her mother had been preparing something meant only for her. The next morning, Louise tries to talk to Michael about their mother, about the strange whispers and who she might have been speaking to. But Michael cuts her off, saying it's pointless to dig into the past. Frustrated, he storms off, leaving Louise alone with her thoughts. Later that day, Louise steps into the shower, trying to calm herself. The water runs quietly until she hears the faint creak of a door, then slow footsteps. She hesitates, wipes the fog from the curtain, and pulls it aside. Standing there is her father, his eyes completely white, his body trembling. Without warning, he urinates on himself and shakes his head violently. Terrified, Louise screams for Michael. Michael rushes in, but the bathroom is empty. Their father is nowhere to be found. Louise sits in the corner, shaking, tears running down her face. Later, she tells Michael what she saw. He tries to comfort her and asks if she wants to talk, but she refuses and walks away. As he turns to leave the room, something falls from their father's bed, a diary. Michael picks it up and takes it to Louise. He says it belonged to their mother. When Louise asks if he read it, Michael nods. He says he only looked at the last page, where their mother wrote about someone in the darkness, begging for help, saying he was killing their father. And at the end, she kept repeating one word, devil. Thursday arrives. Louise and Michael sit together in their mother's studio, surrounded by her old things. Michael wonders how their mother managed to hang herself. The police said she stood on the tub, but Louise had already moved it before that day. He points out she was still several feet above the ground when they found her. Louise has no answer. She opens the diary and reads a few lines aloud. Her mother wrote about hearing voices, about one that made her want to die, and how, even after locking the door, he still came inside. Disturbed by what she's reading, Michael tells Louise to stop, but she keeps going, her voice trembling as she reads the next lines, about something climbing onto the bed, hurting their father, laughing at her, and how she felt she was already dead. The scene shifts to a quiet office, where Michael and Louise meet the coroner. He tells them he found several tiny crosses in their mother's pocket. Louise is puzzled. Her mother was never religious. That night, Louise sits by her father's bed, gently massaging his hand. Suddenly, he begins to cough violently. She leans in, and to her horror, a spider crawls out of his mouth. She jerks back, frantically brushing it away. Michael rushes in, asking if she's okay. Still shaken, Louise says it was just a spider, though she's not sure what she really saw. Later that night, Michael is asleep when the lights in his room flicker on by themselves. He gets up, checks the hallway. No one's there. He turns the lights off and lies back down. A moment later, they switch on again. Annoyed, he stands up to check once more. But when he looks out the window, his heart nearly stops. His mother is outside, floating above the ground, smiling. Then, her voice starts singing softly from inside the room. Michael turns slowly, reaches for the switch, and flips on the light. But when he looks back, the room is empty. Friday morning. Louise wakes up and walks to the bathroom. When she looks in the mirror, her face is smeared with red lipstick. Panicking, she scrubs it off and rushes to her father's room, only to find the lipstick tube lying on his bed. Before she can react, the phone rings. She answers but only hears a message saying their number is no longer in service. Confused, she hangs up. The phone rings again. This time, a familiar voice whispers, "I told you not to come." Terrified, Louise slams the receiver down. Meanwhile, Michael returns home and finds a priest standing outside in the rain. The man seems to know him already. Without a word, he hands Michael one of the same small crosses that were found in their mother's pocket. Later, the priest sits with them inside the house. He explains that he once knew their mother, that she was frightened, alone, and that he used to visit her when she needed help. As the priest speaks, Michael and Louise exchange uneasy glances. His words sound sincere, but something about him feels off. They begin to wonder if he was the one who filled their mother's mind with fear. The priest insists he only tried to help her, that she was lonely and needed someone to listen. Michael finally asks him to leave, but before going, he turns back and says quietly, "You heard your mother's warning. The devil isn't out there, it's already here." That night, Louise walks toward the barn, holding her mother's diary. Meanwhile, Michael calls his wife, admitting he doesn't understand what Louise wants anymore. He just wants to go home. He also confesses that his mother was all he had left, showing how distant he feels from his father and sister. Inside the barn, Louise opens the diary and reads another entry. He is watching. He waits. He is everywhere. The air grows heavy. Then, the sound of glass shattering breaks the silence. She looks around, thinking it might be Michael, but a dark shadow forms behind her, stretching taller and taller before the scene fades. Later, the siblings sit together, trying to make sense of everything. Louise insists their mother wasn't insane. Maybe she really saw something. Michael hesitates, then admits he believes her. He says he saw their mother outside his window the previous night. But whatever that thing was, it wasn't truly her. That same night, distant howls echo through the fields. Michael wakes to strange noises outside. He finds Louise already standing by the window, watching. She whispers that something is out there. Carefully, she peeks through the curtain and sees the priest standing in the yard. Michael opens the door, demanding to know what he's doing there. The priest urges them to come outside, his tone calm but unsettling. Louise shines a flashlight on him and freezes. His face looks twisted, almost demonic. In a low, eerie voice, he asks, "Do you want some rope?" Just then, the phone rings. Louise flinches, and in that split second, the priest vanishes. Michael rushes outside but finds nothing. No footprints, no trace of him. The phone rings again. Michael warns Louise not to answer, but she picks it up, hears nothing, and slams it down. She then disconnects the line completely. Moments later, it's revealed that their neighbor, Charlie, had been trying to call them. Back at his house, strange noises echo through the dark. Armed with a shotgun, Charlie moves carefully through his living room and stops cold. Standing before him is Louise, or at least something that looks like her. The figure stares at him, then drags the knife across its own skin. Charlie demands to know what it wants. The entity leans close and whispers something in his ear before accusing him, "You did this to me." Then, right before his eyes, it slits its own throat. Overcome, Charlie puts the gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger. The next morning, Michael and Louise search everywhere but find no trace of the priest. They decide to take their father to the hospital and leave this place. Later, a doctor arrives to check on their father. He warns them not to move him, saying it's too risky. After he leaves, Michael talks to the nurse. He asks if she often sees people at their weakest. She says yes, but she also sees love, and sometimes she's the only one there when someone dies. The worst thing, she adds, is dying alone. Michael mentions how their mother used to say something was coming for him. The nurse replies that while she knows they don't believe in God, she does. And she believes there are dark things in this world, but also love, and love keeps a soul safe. That night, their herd breaks out of the barn. Later, a wounded three-legged goat limps back. When Michael and Louise check, they find the rest of the herd slaughtered. Louise says wolves couldn't have done this. Michael thinks about calling another doctor, but Louise reminds him that their mother warned them not to come. They burn the carcasses, and later, Louise asks how many are left. Michael says maybe 5, including a pregnant goat. He tells her he'll take care of them. Before leaving, he tells Louise to stay with their father. She admits she's scared. Michael says he is too, then heads out to the barn. Inside, he gets a call from his wife, Becky. Soon after, strange noises start, whispers, growls, and then complete silence. From the darkness, he hears his mother singing. She slowly approaches, then screams, "Talk to me." Terrified, Michael falls to the ground and almost slits his throat but stops himself. Moments later, Louise sees him coming into the house, pale and shaking. In his room, he sits on the bed, terrified. That night, while Louise sleeps, her bedroom door slowly creaks open. She hears faint footsteps. Something climbs onto her bed. A shadowy figure appears over her father, growling like an animal. Terrified, Louise turns her head and sees her father pinned to the ceiling, screaming in pain. He shouts, "Run away!" And she jolts awake, realizing it was a nightmare. It's Sunday morning. Louise notices strange marks around her father's neck. She looks for Michael, but he's nowhere to be found. Then, a knock at the door. A young girl stands there, introducing herself as Charlie's granddaughter. She says they tried calling but got no answer, and then quietly tells Louise that Charlie is dead. Louise is stunned. Just then, her father starts coughing, and she lets the girl inside, but her tone suddenly changes. The girl smirks and says, "Do you smell him?" "I bet you do. He's close now. He's rotting." Louise panics and runs to her father's room. When she returns, the girl is gone. Then, out of nowhere, she appears behind Louise, staring right at her before vanishing into thin air. Louise slams the door shut and tries calling Michael, but it goes to voicemail. The nurse arrives and notices her panic. Without saying much, she lights a candle with a picture of Christ and places it beside the father's bed. Meanwhile, Louise tries calling Michael again, this time from the landline. He finally answers. He tells her he's already left. Stunned, Louise demands to know why, how he could just abandon her. Michael says his wife and kids need him, that he loves them. As they argue, the nurse quietly sits nearby, knitting, but then she freezes mid-stitch. A spider crawls across her face as faint whispers fill the room. Meanwhile, Michael pleads with Louise to leave the house and save herself before the call cuts off. Moments later, Louise hears a piercing scream. She rushes toward the sound and finds the nurse brutally stabbing her own face with a knitting needle. Before Louise can react, the nurse drives the needle into her stomach, then turns on Louise, knocking her unconscious. The nurse drags her into the living room, stabs out her own eyes, and collapses to the floor, dead. Meanwhile, far away, Michael returns home only to discover a horrifying scene. His daughters' bodies lying lifeless, and his wife nearby with a knife in her hand. Consumed by grief, he takes his own life, but in his final moments, he realizes the awful truth. It was all an illusion created by the entity. Tragically, his real family walks in seconds later, finding him dead. Becky screams as the reality sinks in. Back at the farmhouse, Louise slowly regains consciousness, her body trembling with pain. She tries to flee, but falls down the stairs. Then, hearing her father's weak cough, she can't bring herself to leave him behind. She crawls back to his room, apologizing softly and promising she won't go. Suddenly, she hears Michael's voice calling for help, followed by dark, whispering echoes filling the room. Louise yells at the unseen presence to leave them alone. The candle the nurse had lit flickers and dies, and her father's breathing begins to slow. Louise holds his hand, telling him she loves him and promising again that she'll stay. As her father takes his final breath, a chilling stillness fills the room. Then, from the darkness, her mother's voice begins to sing, soft, eerie, and familiar. Before Louise can move, something grabs her from behind. Her terrified scream echoes through the empty farmhouse, marking the movie's haunting end. And that's how The Dark and the Wicked comes to an end. A chilling reminder that sometimes evil doesn't come from outside. It's already waiting within. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more horror stories like this. See you later.